Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little advanced TV herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Welcome, TV Herstoryans, to another installment of Advanced TV Herstory. We are so proud to have with us today Sarah Moshman, who has a TV experience. She is one of these behind-the-scenes women who has taken her experience in TV, her love of TV, and turned it into yet another passion. And it's a passion that Sarah and I both share because she is up to her waist right now in telling the stories and really helping us better understand the importance of representation. Now, remember, historians, representation is that whole notion that when you were 6 or 10 or 20, that you were watching TV and you just started to realize the profound impression that you get, that you received watching women and having stories told by women on TV, how that's changed your life, how that's informed you, how that's made you a better person, a more compassionate mother, daughter, sister, whatever your scenario is. And for the gentlemen listening as well, you have your favorite women characters too. You have your favorite women stories. And it's okay to say that. So that's one of the things that we do here is we just celebrate the wisdom, the hard work, and the efforts that have been a part of the true 60-year history of women who have been associated with TV. So Sarah and I share this passion about representation, Sarah being just a bit younger than I am, but with twice as much energy, which is fascinating and fun. And Sarah is now has taken a TV career, moved it into more of a documentary independent film production role. We're going to talk to Sarah today about that, as well as kind of what she sees with the conversation of representation and where this is fitting into a little bit of our social change. So first and foremost, Sarah, welcome to Advanced TV Herstory.
Thank you for having me.
We are curious to know a little bit about your background and a little bit about your time as a woman in TV production, and really help us understand then how that influenced what it is you're doing today.
Sure. So I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, just right outside Chicago. I've always had a passion for filmmaking and storytelling. Cameras were sort of always around in my home. My dad's a producer and filmmaker as well. So I made my first film when I was 16 years old and took those passions to film school at the University of Miami in Florida. And then I moved out to Los Angeles as soon as humanly possible. And I got my start in reality television. So this was like 2008, about 10 years ago. And I did 10 seasons on the hit ABC show Dancing with the Stars. I worked as a field producer on the show. So what that means is I was shooting and interviewing and running audio and coordinating for the rehearsal packages that air before the live dance performances. So I'd be in a dance studio, 12 hours a day with a celebrity dancer couple, watching them practice the tango.
Who was the coolest couple that you ever had to watch?
There were a lot of great people to work with, but I'd say J.R. Martinez was my favorite. He was a war veteran who had actually been pretty badly burned in Iraq. And so his story was just very inspiring. And his partner, Karina Smirnoff, was just a joy to work with. So they were really fun. And he ended up winning that season.
That was a very memorable story. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So moving on then from Dancing with the Stars, which in and of itself is a career highlight.
Yes. But what's great about that is it really complements the skills of documentary filmmaking. So the two really go together for me in my brain, which is how do you tell a story in a short amount of time? What are those elements that you need to get from your story, from your interview subject in order to communicate that emotion to an audience? And so around 2012 is when I started to get really frustrated and aware of the media landscape and how it misrepresents and portrays women, how we undervalue women, we objectify them, we over-sexualize them. And there just aren't enough positive female role models for girls and for women, frankly, to be able to see themselves reflected back. And when I say positive female role models, that can mean complex and flawed and villainous as well. It's just like the lack overall is just astounding. And so after making a couple of short documentaries about female empowerment in my kind of hiatuses on these shows I was working on, I decided to just go for it and drop everything and make my first feature-length documentary, which is called The Empowerment Project. And so what that film entailed is a good old-fashioned road trip. Me and 4 other female filmmakers got in a minivan, and we drove clear across the United States from Los Angeles all the way to New York. Within a month, we drove over 7,000 miles through 22 states. And we interviewed 17 women in total, from a pilot to an athlete, astronaut, mathematician, a 4-star admiral, a brewmaster, a human rights attorney. I mean, you name it, we tried to cover it. And the point of the film was not to interview celebrities or even Fortune 500 CEOs, which, as we know, there are so few women in those roles. The point of the film was to showcase these, quote, ordinary women doing extraordinary things so that we could really practice what we preach and shine that bright light on women that are everywhere, that are our mothers and daughters and sisters and neighbors and friends. And it was a really powerful experience. I spent about 6 or 7 months in post-production after the road trip, and then we finished the film in April 2014. And since then, it's sort of been this whole other journey of sharing that film now with audiences all over the world. We go to schools with the film, we go to organizations, corporations, various workplaces, and spark these really important dialogues about gender equality and about not being afraid to fail. I think so much of what we experience as young girls, at least in the United States, is this idea of you have to be perfect or polite and very nice and don't take up too much space. And this was the opposite of that. What would you do if you weren't afraid to fail kind of goes against all of those tendencies that we learn at such a young age. And so I've had the tremendous honor and privilege of traveling all over the world with this film and taking part in these dialogues and seeing firsthand, truly, how the power of cinema is very real and what that looks like when a girl sees herself reflected in her media or even what she hopes to be. And a good, very quick story about that is a young woman came up to me in Seattle and after seeing an astronaut in our film, The Empowerment Project, she said, I had no idea that women could even be astronauts. And now I want to be an astronaut. And that's it, okay, we did what we came to do at the end. And that was 4 years ago. So it has just been incredibly powerful. So that's my first feature. My second feature-length documentary is called Losing Sight of Shore. And it is the unbelievable true story of these heroic women, a team called the Coxless Crew, the 4 women who got in a 29-foot pink ocean rowing boat and rowed, not sailed, rowed across the entire Pacific Ocean from America all the way to Australia, over 8,000 miles. They rowed 24 hours a day, 2 hours on, 2 hours off for 9 months. So I had nothing to complain about when I was dry and on land, trying to raise money for the project and planning the next shoot. But even so, it was truly the greatest adventure of my career so far. And it has.
So you would hop in a boat and then with a motor find where they were and take footage, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I gave them cameras. I taught them how to use the cameras. They had hard drives, microphones, everything they needed to be storytellers on the boat they had. And then I would meet them on land along the way. So they stopped in Santa Barbara. They had an emergency, which you can see in the film what happens. Then in Hawaii, I was there, and then Samoa, which is this tiny, tiny island. And then for the big finish in Australia. So every time they were within about 12 hours of shore, myself and their shore support, this incredible guy named Tony Humphreys, we would go out on a boat with various cameras, drone cameras, and go and capture. And every time I saw this tiny pink dot on the horizon, I would just burst into tears because it was so overwhelming to see that they were really out there. They weren't just phoning it in and using a motor for days and then just deciding to row. No, they were rowing 24 hours a day, and they didn't give up, and they achieved the impossible. And it's just the most inspiring story I've ever heard. So we had a very happy ending to all of this. It was about a 2-year journey for me, and I put in all the money I had into the film. So it was a huge risk professionally and personally. But we did sell the film to Netflix. So now it's available in 190 countries and subtitled in 25 languages. So it was a total dream come true, and still very much is.
So people with a Netflix account, is it currently showing on Netflix, or
Yes.
documentary?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And its title again is?
Losing Sight of Shore.
Excellent. So you just cued in to the perfect segue. You were talking about the fact that you put all your money you had into this. It was great that you got Netflix to sign on board. Now you have another project. You went out on a crowdfunding campaign and you scored, right?
Yes. So my latest film is called Nevertheless, and it's about the sexual harassment crisis in America. I started filming this project when I was 8 months pregnant last year. If you can believe it, I started filming on October 4th, and the Weinstein story broke on October 5th. So the timing of this project has been pretty unbelievable. And for me, it came from, my own experiences, experiencing harassment, working in television, all kinds of, gender discrimination and bias that so many of us women experience when working in a male-dominated field. And when I found out I would be bringing a daughter into this world, I felt these like inner demons kind of bubble up. I was excited, of course. It's what I wanted, but part of me knew too much. I know what she's going to go through as a girl. And part of that was very scary for me to have not spoken up for myself in the past. And so Nevertheless was really kind of that's what I do best when I have a problem I can't solve, or I want to see my role in the solution, use activism. I get to work. And so I rented equipment, I hired a crew, I scheduled 16 interviews, and I just started asking questions. How did we get here as a country? What are the ways in which that we perpetuate this cycle of harassment? So Nevertheless is not about pointing the finger at any one powerful man or company. It's really about the systems that we all perpetuate, that we all put in place to, allow this behavior to continue, and what are the tools and solutions that we can all agree upon to move forward with and make our workplaces safer for everyone.
True, because when you're trying to change a culture, it will be a grassroots movement that got started last October. Cultural change is, it has to happen one person at a time, one industry at a time, one company, one office within a company at a time. And then behavior has to be modeled. And then once people start to recognize, as now it is more often, noted in news articles or TV reports, that yes, major corporations that have a diverse board of directors really do perform better. Mm-hmm. That when there are women in the C-suite, that the company does perform better. And that is starting to shift from being sort of a legend or, disputable to now almost irrefutable. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take a lot of learning and a lot of unlearning. And ultimately, as you raised the point you raised, women need to not be afraid to fail, because that's what we're wired to do, and American women at least. So, and I kind of think internationally, worldwide, I think, it has to, you've traveled, but tell me, don't they look at us American women, and I will be so bold as to say white American women are as steeped in privilege as we possibly can be. Mm-hmm. And if we can't make it happen, then nobody can. And so, do you get that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I recently traveled to Russia last year, as well as Djibouti in Africa a couple months ago, and to show the Empowerment Project as well as Losing Sight of Shore. And it's pretty amazing, this universal experience that we have as women. But when I would describe, the inequities that we experience as white privileged American women, the women of Djibouti at least couldn't believe it. We live in such a rich, developed country. It would seem as though we have everything that we could possibly need. And in some ways, maybe we do in comparison. But the women in Djibouti who have so little were just shocked that we feel unequal to our male counterparts here in such a rich country. So that was eye-opening for me. And then in Russia, a very interesting comment someone made about the Empowerment Project, which was that this woman asked, do you ever have, school administrators or people who say, oh, I don't want to screen this film at my school because I don't want the girls to be empowered? And I was very surprised to hear that, because sometimes in the US, we get comments like, oh, we don't need this film. Our girls are plenty empowered. So it's sort of the opposite. And I thought, wow, the fact that there is a time and place in which someone would not want the girls and women to realize that they have a voice. They wouldn't want them to think about not being afraid to fail. I mean, that just speaks volumes about the oppression that some women feel in Russia. So, it is fascinating to step outside of our boundaries and borders and ask these questions and realize that we're a lot more alike than we are different.
That's very, very well said. Very well put. All right. So then that gets us back to my crowdfunding question of this project that you're working on.
Yes.
Where is it? How can we expect to see it and access it and contribute more? And my advanced TV Herstoryans, they're a loyal bunch. So
great. Yeah. So we did a Kickstarter campaign. Thanks to very amazing donors like yourself, we within 30 days, we raised $57,821 from 610 people. You never kind of forget your stats. And it was a great experience. Crowdfunding is never easy. It is my second campaign within 5 years. And to me, crowdfunding is so much more than just fundraising. It's just such a wonderful way to connect with other people and find resources for your project. It's just awesome. So if anyone wants to talk further about that, I'm happy to do so. But nevertheless, is in a good spot. We're in production. I still have some money I need to raise, of course. These documentaries take a lot of funding. But I'm applying for grants. I'm looking for private individual donors that would be willing to donate through my fiscal sponsor so they can get a tax write-off. And I just did another round of interviews this past month. We did 11 more interviews with incredible experts in various fields of sexual harassment, from the historical side to the legal side to the social side to the masculinity angle on this. I'm really trying to cover our bases. The intersectional side, I'm absolutely trying to be as woke as possible and think about how race interacts with harassment as well as sexuality. So this is not going to be a white woman's privileged look at sexual harassment. It is going to be as inclusive as I can possibly make it. And so, we're in production. I'm planning the next set of interviews, and it's just a little bit of shoot a little, let it marinate, think about what's next, shoot a little more, and then we'll be in post-production. The goal of having the film done by fall, winter of next year, 2019. And then the film will be available for screenings in workplaces and schools, organizations all over the world. So that's our distribution model that we're going to begin with. And then we're going to be looking at a larger digital release down the road as well.
Well, that is awesome. And because you had your decade of experience in reality TV, that it really feels like spawned the larger storyteller in you, that you weren't satisfied with that. You will always be a member of the TV Herstory archive, and we're going to have you back in a year and a half or a year and 2 months to talk about the release and to talk about how people can bring it into their workplace or bring it to their Girl Scout troop, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And Herstoryans, I will just ask you that if you have access, if your company has a foundation or you're associated with a women's group that either gives out grants, small or large, or creates opportunities or connections. We're at the end of this episode, we're going to tell you how to get a hold of Sarah so that you can become part of this movement that helps her ensure that the quality and the distribution of her end product is everything that it needs to be, because we can't waste a single effort. And if you're listening to this and you're listening from a point of white privilege, which is a big thing even to say out loud, we white women need to really start recognizing that which we have, that is power and that is access, and that your recommendation, your referral, your inquiry to any organization that moves this project along, that's what we set out to do every time we appear at a march, right? Every time we get all mad and we retweet something, we can do more than retweet. We can leverage this. And most importantly, we can put some of these messages in front of younger generations to know and to celebrate the fact that we are all in this together and we are trying to make change. So that's my little soapbox moment here that Sarah probably wasn't expecting, but
I love it.
We have audience and we have opportunity, and we're trying to do the right thing for your daughter as well as mine being her birthday is at the end of August, actually, and she will turn 24. So
great.
You've got some years ahead of you. All right. So I just have 2 more questions to wrap up Sarah's time, because she's fulfilling obligations to her own production schedule, but also had agreed to just answer some basic ones. My next one is this. So from your perspective, this career in TV, which has now really blossomed into an international documentary, finger on the pulse of so much going on, and you've given TED Talks, and you are in places, right? What are some of the stories? Are there more stories of the 4 women rowing across the ocean? Or, I mean, if you had infinite resources, what are some of the other stories you would be telling, or you'd be telling Netflix to go book next week?
It's a great question. I mean, to me, I mean, for example, with the Coxless Crew, the story of the women rowing across the Pacific, when I came to meet them, and it was through a mutual friend, like someone emailed me in January 2015 and said, hey, these 4 women are about to row across the Pacific Ocean. I couldn't believe it. And what was more surprising was that no one else was telling their story. And this is such an unbelievable story to tell. And I was grateful, I guess, that no one had the courage to take on this huge risk. But I think that also speaks volumes to our culture. And why wasn't anyone excited to tell their story? And why wasn't there, a huge network kind of signed on to see the results of this? And why didn't we get more press when they made it across the Pacific? I think there's some inherent bias that we have to fight against, but there are stories like this every single day. And it doesn't have to be a human feat of strength like this. This is definitely kind of a once in a lifetime story, but there are women breaking through boundaries and paving the way as trailblazers in every aspect of life. And so many of their stories have been largely ignored. Even when you think about our history books and the history that we're teaching our children in schools, it very much ignores the experiences, the triumphs, and the struggles of women and pioneers. So, and if I had anything to say to Netflix or any network for that matter that's interested in telling more dynamic stories, would just be to look at the intense breadth of women's stories that there are in every aspect. So anything that perpetuates this representation and strong female role models is something I can get behind.
And what I would add to that charge to Netflix is you need only look at what is being brought forward through podcasting, the tremendous number of podcasts, largely independent podcasts produced by women, who are talking about the stories of women athletes, of women in STEM careers. I mean, we're trying so hard to elevate and celebrate and also articulate the challenge so that we're kind of catching everybody wherever they happen to be in their own sort of feminist evolution, in their recognition of sort of some of the disparity and the inequity that's going on. Yeah. But here's a story, here's some inspiration, and keep sharing it, keep forwarding, keep promoting, whether your format is audio, whether it's on radio, whether it's TV or documentaries or big feature film. So I think this is a very exciting time to be in media wherever we happen to be, recognizing that there's a sister across the room working in a different media trying to tell this story. And that's why I'm just so grateful for your energy and your ongoing success, and wish you well on that. So my last question.
Thank you.
Last question, which I ask most guests when I have the presence of mind to do it, and that is, share with us 3 TV shows that influenced you when you were a girl or a teen.
Okay, I loved with my whole heart The Wonder Years. I think Kevin Arnold is my dreamboat. I loved The Secret World of Alex Mack. I think she was a great role model for girls. She was always like solving problems and being bold. And then, of course, Friends. That was just something that we just all watched in that era of like 90s. And that was me and my friends would be like, oh, I'm the Phoebe, or I'm the Monica, or I'm the Rachel. So those are the 3 that come to mind.
Wow. All right. Well, that's no one has ever said those 3. And frankly, you dug deep on Wonder Years. I mean, that's a definitely classic. It really is. It really is. And was produced with such a sensitivity that we just don't see today. And as we last little soapbox point, but as we really start to worry and be concerned that there's this lack of civility at every corner, and that people will say words that previously just, wow, the words hurt. But if there's really intent behind the words, then that's even worse. There used to be some really, really quality programming that was not highbrow. It was not elite. It wasn't Downton Abbey. It was just much more sensitive and inspirational. So I have no doubt that you have one of those projects in your future, although frankly, telling the story of women doing extraordinary things is inspiration enough. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Any other thoughts, conclusions, or words of wisdom you want to share with the listeners?
Sure. I would say if you have a project in mind, it doesn't have to be a film, whatever that looks like for you. Don't wait for permission to get started. I think you'll wait forever if you feel like there's going to be this moment where you're going to be, quote, ready, because you're never going to feel ready. And I love that idea of great people. They do things before they're ready. So I think some of the greatest experiences I've had in my career are when I was so overwhelmed and had no idea what I was doing, but I figured it out step by step. So don't wait for permission if you've got that kind of fire burning in your soul. Just get going. Take a step today, take another couple tomorrow, and before you know it, something magical will happen.
And if you need listeners, if you need Sarah as the example, the best thing you can do is go to her website and really get to understand her career to date, the projects. You'll learn a little bit more about the ones that she's already described, and her website and contact information she's about to provide to you.
Yeah, you can find me in all things Sarah Moshman at sarahmoshman.com. I'm on Twitter at Sarah Mosh, on Instagram at Sarah Moshman, and that's SarahMoshman.
That is just awesome. And you really do. You respond, you are accessible, and you're the real deal. So that's why I sought you out to be a guest on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Listeners, I am going to follow up with just a little bit more of the usual, how to get a hold of us and send us your thoughts and feedback. But Sarah, thanks so much for having us on your schedule this morning and taking a half an hour from your little one and your otherwise busy production day. So we wish you all the very best. Listeners, did you find that as inspiring as I did? Wow. Sarah Moshman, what an up-and-comer. We're going to be hearing from her for a long time to come. And I am thrilled that Advanced TV Herstory was able to bring her across medium, from her days in TV and TV production to now the great work that she's doing in documentaries, which then get sold to Netflix so that we're able to see them on our TV versus having to head to the local independent art house theater to see it. It's right there in your house. If you get a chance and you've got a Netflix account, do go find her documentary of a couple of years ago called Losing Sight of Shore. She described it in this podcast episode. As always, go to Advanced TV Herstory's many places out there in the digital world. Find us on the web at tvherstory.com or follow us on Instagram. Our account is Advanced TV Herstory. On Twitter, you'll find us at TV Herstory. And we have a Facebook and YouTube account that we are populating whenever we can with really good stuff. The YouTube account also is including a lot of fun descriptions of back episodes of this podcast. Just having as much fun as we possibly can. Email us if you're a little bit more of a private person to advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. And yes, if you appreciate the quality of this podcast and find that its availability and distribution channels is making it easier for you to access us, then please consider becoming a patron by using our Patreon account. So go to tvherstory.com, scroll down, and where it says Become a Patron, this is your opportunity to put a couple bucks in the tip jar. And I have to thank Rochelle, who was our first patron, for doing just that. Lastly, subscribe to this podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts, wherever your podcatcher lives. And also, in most of these places, you can just press play. So go to Apple Podcast, Radio Public, Google Podcast. But most importantly, wherever you are grabbing these episodes or just pressing play, do take a moment and give us a review, write a comment, put in your own thoughts, because this podcast only gets better because of the input and the ideas that listeners generate. It is a great pleasure for me to bring it to you, and I am honored that you take the time to listen to these great ideas, to the energy and the inspiration that we can find in someone like Sarah Moshman. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.